Wednesday, and that Josh Hawley and some other senators and some members, House members, who have stated that they claim to have seen the evidence, and that the evidence is overwhelming and massive. There's been talk about that Trump was going to take some action that would prevent, I guess, for the lack of a better term, the inauguration of Joe Biden as president. We've talked about that. Is that something you can talk about?
Yeah.
Even you know, even if you don't know specifically, tell us what you can.
Yeah, no, there's a lot I can talk about. So, I mean, with respect to things I cannot talk about. If I was involved with a client regarding some business, obviously I can't talk about them or their technology or their business. I alluded to one before, but I didn't go into depth. If there's something that's classified, there's a law that says I can't talk about it, and of course I won't. But these things I don't have any direct official knowledge of, and I'm not prohibited from talking about them, so certainly will. I am aware that President Donald Trump created an executive order on September 12th, 2018, regarding foreign interference in American election processes. And in that executive order, it specifies that anyone who acts on behalf of a foreign government, any foreigner, any American citizen who acts as a proxy in interfering with an election will be guilty. And certainly one of the interesting actions in that executive order is that the Treasury Secretary will be directed to block all of their assets. That means if they have money in a retirement fund, money in a loan, money in the bank, it's all blocked. They can't get it. They can't take the money out. They can't use it for any purpose. Further, it's made illegal for anyone to give them charity or assistance, which I really, really like, because if somebody has turned traitor against this country, it's darn time for them to be left high and dry like an ordinary citizen. You go after an ordinary citizen and you impound their money, now they don't have the ability to get a lawyer for a defense, et cetera, et cetera. So we're now taking some of these filthy rich people who are colluding and corrupt and beginning to treat them the way that the rest of us would be treated under similar circumstances. And the first one that comes to mind is Eric Swalwell, who's been all over the media colluding with a Chinese spy. And there's no doubt that happened. And the woman's name is out, and there are pictures of them together. I mean, this is tried in the media, but we're pretty certain that that's accurate. So I would think he'd be one of the first. Another thing that's in that September 12th executive order is that anyone who spreads propaganda about the election on behalf of a foreign entity is also guilty of the violation of election interference, and their assets will be blocked. So when I look at that, one of the requirements that executive order set up is that the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, is required to put together an intelligence report delivered to the president no later than 45 days after the conclusion of an election, and to the president and to the cabinet, detailing all of the information that they can find about foreign elections. DNI Radcliffe has said that he's going to miss the 45-day date. The report that he'll be making to the president and cabinet is highly classified. We, the American people, may never see the full content of that report, but I'm sure some of that will come out. So President Trump is likely going to have information from the intelligence community that points directly to hacking, collusion of hackers to go against the United States to interfere in the election. I'm certain there's going to be some evidence there. With respect to some of these senators in the Senate who are and in the House who are going to oppose the certification of elector results, I too have seen the evidence. It's overwhelming. I read the Supreme Court brief that Sidney Powell had posted, just the one for the state of Arizona. I had mistakenly assumed that they would remain online, and they've been taken down. I was fortunate enough to copy the combined exhibits, all of the affidavits that were attached to that Arizona lawsuit. It's hundreds and hundreds of pages. The Supreme Court filing was 1,600 and some odd pages long, just for the state of Arizona. And then there were 4 others that she had prepared and put up. So I've seen some of the evidence. It's astronomical in volume, and it's overwhelming. And I would absolutely agree that this election was tampered with. So what might happen? So Trump has this executive order of September 12, 2018 that he could act on. I don't believe that there is enough support in the Congress of the United States for both houses to agree that the election was thrown. In particular, the House of Representatives is Democrat, and I don't think that they are going to disagree with their coronation of Kamala Harris as president. Oh, by the way, Biden is probably not going to remain president if Biden gets elected. He's going to be senile, or he's going to have some other problem. In 6 months, he'll either step down and hand it over to Kamala Harris, or she'll have him declared mentally incompetent. Kamala Harris, on several occasions, had a faux pas, a slip of the tongue, where she referred to the Harris administration. So, I mean, this is.
Well, there was more than that, but hell, it wasn't long ago that there was a commission that Nancy Pelosi was going to put together to review if any candidate or office holder for the office of the President of the United States was incapacitated for any reason. And I mean, that's just kind of glossing over it, because that's not getting into the real details of what it meant. But the bottom line was, everybody thought that was going to be something they were going to use on Donald Trump. Well, I believe that was just a precursor of what they're going to do to Joe Biden after they use him to get the election results behind him.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall in some of these secret meetings where this
Amen.
But that's certainly a theory that I've heard, and I don't have reason to believe it, nor do I have reason to disbelieve it. So it remains a possibility to be seen. There certainly is the Insurrection Act, which Trump could declare. And I've heard martial law tossed about as a possibility, and I actually need to go to research all the provisions of martial law statutes and understand what they mean, to understand whether there would be any value in him doing that. Certainly, if there's a massive uprising, martial law would be a way to control that. But you have to ask a question. Those of us on the conservative side tend to think that Donald Trump won this election by a landslide. If that is correct, and I'm saying if, then there are far more people who are conservative and believe in the patriotic values that Trump and his agenda stand for than there are liberals who want to oppose it. And I would think that an uprising in this country might result in a civil war. And then I have to ask, which side is it that's pro-gun and which side is anti-gun? And which side on which side are you likely to find more weapons and more ammunition? And gee, doesn't that kind of explain why Biden wants to put Beto O'Rourke in as his guns are and seize all the weapons? So what might happen is up in the air. I wish I had a crystal ball and it could be more definitive about what's going to happen in the next week or two. I expect to see some serious unrest in this country. I don't know where that's going. I'm watching on a daily basis and trying to learn more. But as I think about it, I have to look back. So a lot of what I have done over the years as a certified anti-terrorism specialist is to look at trends and tendencies among groups that would drive them toward terrorism, look for those motivations, look for the communications and so forth. I've been very, very well trained in how all of that works. And I took a look at Antifa specifically. Antifa is using professional intelligence tradecraft. I have to be very careful about saying that. Professional intelligence tradecraft. What does that mean? It means that they are trained in the same way that our CIA trains spies. They are trained in the use of intelligence tradecraft, in the use of deception, in the use of extortion, in the use of weapons, in the use of creating and running spies, handlers for spies, and how to influence and control people. That is what the human intelligence element does. And these people are trained in professional insurgent tradecraft. Now, there was an occasion where, and I'm going to be a little bit vague here and not identify it, but there was an occasion where a Confederate statue was to be torn down. And that Confederate statue, it was a memorial to soldiers who fought in the Confederate War and lost their lives in defending their homes. And on the bottom of the cement base of the statue, there is a Confederate flag embedded in the concrete. But beyond that, there's really it's not an honor of the Confederacy. It's an honor of the dead who fought to protect their home. So really more of a veterans memorial than it is a Confederate War memorial. But we had heard that an Antifa-driven movement was taking advantage of some BLM organizations and people, and they were planning to come tear the statue down. And I was involved in looking for evidence that was likely to happen. With appropriate evidence, the local law enforcement folks could take certain actions if they had probable cause, reasonable belief this was going to happen. They could do certain things, and without that reasonable belief, if they took these same actions, they might be seen as antagonists for a situation. So very difficult and very important to find it. And I went out looking for it. And I have to tell you, while I had a half a dozen people who were insiders reporting that they knew this was going to happen, that it was certain, they gave us dates, times, locations, transportation routes, all the rest, and we had all of that information. We could not find a single shred of evidence online anywhere that this was going to happen. They were using an encrypted communications network. They were using professional intelligence operations security. And so, as I look at what's been done to separate and divide us, and oh, by the way, Black lives do matter. So do white lives. So do blue lives. So do all the rest. Saying one doesn't mean that the others don't matter, but there have been a lot of these Antifa-driven instigations to convince people that, you know, if you say one, you mean the others don't. Well, guess what, folks? That's an effort to divide us. And I go back to what Benjamin Franklin said in the Revolutionary War. He said, gentlemen, we must hang together or surely we will hang separately. And he was so true. I would encourage all of the viewers, before you take a political stance on an issue like BLM, and you need to ask whether or not the actions being reported are intended to divide you, are intended to divide us into something other than a united country. If we are united, nobody can oppose us. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and blew up our ships, but they were afraid to come to the continental United States because we were united. We're not united now. And that's a huge vulnerability.
Pete has said to me that in the course of all of this, the potential of using the Insurrection Act and what follows from that, the civil unrest that would follow from that, that there was, the expectation was that there are a large number of political figures that have been taking money from the Chinese. Eric Swalwell is just the tip of the iceberg, and that there was a potential for mass arrests and imprisonment and tribunals down at Gitmo. Do you know anything about that?
I've heard the rumors. I do know, and you can verify this by going to doj.gov, there are more than 180,000 sealed indictments at the DOJ, and I haven't looked in the last couple of months. It's 180,000 couple months ago. There are thousands and thousands, like 6,000 from New York, 8,000 from California, et cetera. And it lists them by state. Of course, it doesn't give you any detail of what's going on. A sealed indictment means that a grand jury has been convened. Evidence has been presented to the grand jury. Of course, in the grand jury process, only the prosecutor is allowed to appear. The defense attorney is the defendant. They don't get to see what's going on. But this is a process where the prosecution says, here's my evidence. Here's what we have that happened. And the jury agrees, yes, it looks like a real crime has been committed. There needs to be a trial. So an indictment's not a trial, but it is an early view at the evidence and an early acceptance of that evidence. And there are over 180,000 indictments that are waiting to happen. Somebody once asked me, and we were talking months ago about Hillary Clinton and the Uranium One scandal. Hillary scooped a whole bunch of uranium off of our stockpile, sold it to the Russians for $350 million. Which somehow landed in the Clinton Foundation, and that is still an open question. How did that happen? But you know, there was some other speculation that some of that was scooped off the top and given to Iran and other hostile regimes, whereby a future attack on the United States might be possible with a nuclear device, and the radioactive materials would be traceable to United States origin. It just again, I hate to go back to Hollywood, but that happened in the movie The Sum of All Fears. Yep. There was an explosion in Baltimore, and the uranium was ours. The plutonium was ours. It came from K reactor, whatever, right? So, I mean, we see these things going on. I don't know them to be true. I shudder to believe that they are, but I am too afraid to dismiss them as idle speculation. So, when I hear things like this, I take these theories on as possibilities. I don't draw a conclusion from them, but it does tell me where to look. And this is something I've said about intelligence for years. Intelligence doesn't protect you. Intelligence doesn't save your bacon. Intelligence just tells you where to look. But if you know that the enemy is coming in your backyard and you can defend your backyard, and you know that you don't have to worry about the side or the front, you got a better chance of survival. So, I mean, it does help, but you have to apply the intelligence correctly in order for it to be of value. And so what's going to happen, I'm not sure. The Insurrection Act, I'd have to look at in detail. There's so many ways that things could play out that at this point, I'm still uncertain where we're headed.
I think everybody is. Do you think there's been a lot of discussion about how and if the Chinese would detonate an EMP, and as part of this cyber warfare. What do you know about that? Anything?
Well, EMP is an interesting theory. The problem with EMP is it takes everything out. So it's not discriminatory. I can't have an EMP that works against the financial community and leaves power available. EMP would just wipe everything out. It would wipe out the power grid, the communications grid, all the computers, all the banking, all the records of your money. If you've got investment money someplace else and it's not, and that data are not backed up outside of the U.S., the investment data might be all lost. You might lose everything in that way. I don't believe the Chinese would try EMP. It's too unproven in warfare as a weapon, and B, it's too unnecessary. I'm going to go back to 2007 when our Department of Energy had an interesting experiment. It was called Operation Aurora. You can find Operation Aurora on the internet. Google it. It's going to take you, you're going to have to go down 2 or 3 pages to find it. It was a DOE program in 2007. What they did was they hired Delta Force to come in and attack a power generation facility with a cyber attack to see what they could do. And what is online is a video of that attack. So we've got pictures of the power generator from inside the building and pictures from outside the building. And what we see when the attack starts is the machine violently shutters. This diesel generator, which is probably 25 feet long and 12 feet high, the whole thing starts to shutter. And then we see parts flying off and it starts to smoke. And looking from the outside, the smokestack turns from clear to black smoke. The power generation facility was completely destroyed by a cyber attack. And I want to tell you that it's so easy to implement that cyber attack that I could explain to you how to do it in 5 minutes. 5 minutes, I could teach you how to do that cyber attack. It's that easy. So would they use an EMP? Probably not. I think they would probably attack our internet and our communications. They would do cyber attacks against the power grid and take the generation facilities down. It's been done before. It has been done before. I look back on what the Russians did. So there were 2 wars or 2 incidents that come to mind. There was the Georgia-South Ossetian War. And it's very interesting because in this war, the Russians implemented a massive cyber attack, and 24 hours later, there was an invasion of troops on the ground. The massive cyber attack took down the entire communications network. It took down the financial infrastructure. It took down all of the credit card transactions, all the financial transactions across the whole country. It took out all the communications, and 24 hours later, there were boots on the ground. So is that possible here? It's absolutely possible here. Is it likely here? I'm going to say not terribly likely. I mean, if there were a kinetic invasion, it would be more like the plot of the movie Red Dawn, where they would start in certain areas of the country and start to take over things. I know where I would do it if I were in charge of such an operation. Again, you think about what the possibilities are, and then you develop defensive strategies against them. But if I were to try to take over part of the country, where would I take over? The northern part of the Midwest, where our missile silos are. That's what I would take over first, because once I control the missile silos, I control the rest of the world. That would be the target, and set up defenses, and then move out from there to escalate into the rest of the country. And I would do a cyber attack against the finance systems, take the financial systems out. Without money, you're in big trouble. Most of my money's in the bank. Most of my money, I use a plastic card when I need gas. What happens if I don't have cash in my pocket to buy gas, or cash in my pocket to buy food? So, do I need EMP? No. There are plenty of conventional ways to do it, and I think through a combination of existing technologies and attacks, as well as sleeper cells and other things we haven't anticipated. We've already seen biowarfare used. I think that's going to continue to be used. Together, does it give us the same level of vulnerability as we would have if an EMP were to be used? I would say, yeah, it does. Together, we're already there, and we don't need an EMP to do that.
Tell us about the Pentagon incident.
You're talking about the Biden team. That was very interesting.
Yes.
The Biden transition team went into the Pentagon, and the Secretary of Defense gave them deliberately false information. Now, the interesting thing about the deliberately false information is, because it's false, it's unique. We can uniquely identify this one particular piece of information because he gave them something that wasn't true, was made up, but it was contrived in such a way that we would be able to find it. 30 minutes later, again, the Biden transition team was the only one who had this piece of information. 30 minutes later, it was compromised to the Communist Chinese Party. It had to have come from the Biden team. They are the only ones other than SecDef who had the information. So the Biden transition team was thrown out of the Pentagon. They don't deserve security clearances. They don't merit security clearances, and the security clearances were yanked. I have to think, and I know for a fact that a lot of this bribery and a lot of what goes on in foreign espionage is extortion. When I was a young sailor in the Navy some 40 years ago, I was given an operations security briefing going into Hamburg, Germany, and they warned us about all the foreign agents that were there and how the foreign agents would approach us and buy us a beer, and then they would offer to take us to parties, and they would give us money and drugs and introduce us to girls and provide whatever we wanted. Somebody give them, give you a car and hook you up with girls for sex or whatever. And we're watching this briefing, and I remember thinking, laughing internally and thinking, yeah, sure. Yeah, that's going to happen to me. Yeah, right. I don't believe that for a second. So we went out on Liberty, and I was sitting at a bar near the docks, and exactly that to the letter happened. I ran into a fellow who, just pretending to be a local citizen, said hello and was being nice. And before the conversation was over, he offered me his Mercedes. He offered me drugs. He offered me women. He put 500 Deutschmarks on the table to give to me. Just give it to me with no constraints, no expectations. He was an intelligence agent trying to bribe me. And what they were trying to do is find some little thing that they could use to leverage. So the guy kept asking me, oh, you're on that ship. How fast can the ship go? Well, how fast the ship can go is confidential. It's classified. Well, I don't know. I just tie ropes. I mean, I gave him some bogus answers, and I never said anything I shouldn't say, but he kept probing, looking for any little thing that he could twist to get a bigger thing, that he could then twist to get a bigger thing until I had done something that was a national security violation, and then that would be held over my head as an extortion. So with that as a background, it actually does happen. That's the methodology they use. When I look at the Biden presidency and I look back at a bunch of other events, there are a lot of people there. I'd love to see the list of all the people who went to Epstein Island, but I wonder in my mind if all of the pedophilia and so forth that went on at Epstein Island was being monitored by the Chinese. Somebody has the videotapes of all of that. Somebody is holding those videotapes to force people to do their will, or it'll be exposed. And I'm wondering how much of that is motivation. Hunter Biden is rumored to have had some illegal encounters with underage boys in China. I can absolutely promise you that if that happened, the Chinese have it on video. 100% certain. If something like that did happen, the Chinese have it on video. And I could also assure you that that would be used to extort Biden, the Biden family. Joe Biden lost one son at an early age. I bet you anything as a human, he wants to make sure his remaining son stays around. So he's, vehemently defending Hunter and anything that Hunter might have done wrong. And if Hunter's done any of that stuff in China, the Chinese have it. They're blackmailing Hunter, and with 100% certainty would be blackmailing Joe Biden as well. So we have a compromised president who's not qualified to sit in the White House. I can look at the financial terms and dealings that are reported for the Biden family to have had with China. Without doing the forensics on them, without having the hard evidence, the one thing I can tell you from decades of experience is that where there's smoke, there's fire. So if we were to do a full forensic examination of all the accusations that have been laid against the Bidens, my suspicion is that some of it would be true. Enough of it would be true to disqualify him from the presidency and potentially to lead to criminal conviction. So, that's where I stand from a belief perspective. I think that there is likely some evidence. I question whether or not that evidence exists against the Biden family and is in the hands of the Chinese or someone else. But the Chinese are principally the ones that most concern me. I have a friend who designed the International Broadcast Center in Beijing, China for the Olympics, and went to China. I have been briefed numerous times on going to China. I was asked to go to China in my professional work years ago, about 14 years ago, and I refused because I understand what's going on over in that country. But we are told that China is a surveillance state. You can go to the U.S. Department of State and look at travel advisories. It's on the State Department's website. In China, you will be under surveillance 100% of the time. Even if you're naked in the shower, you're under surveillance. You're probably under video surveillance naked in the shower in China. Your hotel room is bugged. Your taxi cabs are bugged. Your breakfast locations are bugged. Every place is bugged. You're under 100% surveillance in the country of China. And so you can't do anything that the government doesn't know about. And if you say anything that's even this far off, you're going to be arrested and you're going to be in prison for a long time in China. So this friend who built the International Broadcast Center over there told me about his experiences, and in fact was able to validate that that actually does happen. The Chinese don't believe in privacy at all, and it is so foreign to the way that we think in this country that it's easy to doubt. But, again, this is a case where, our government's going to tell you that that's the case. If you go look at the State Department website, look at the travel warnings about China, and we've got actual people who've been there who validate these things. So it's not a great society. And, anybody who thinks that anything the Chinese promise them is going to be there for long is sadly mistaken. The Chinese will promise you something and it'll be there only as long as it is in their interest to give it to you. And as soon as it's in their interest to take it away, they will. And so from that point of view, it's confusing to me why so many people would take bribes from the government of China, either directly or through a proxy. If you've done the homework, you know that their promises are hollow. They're not worth the paper they're written on. So why would anybody do that? Maybe they think they're going to come out ahead somehow. But that motivation escapes me. I'm having trouble understanding why.
One last thing. You uncovered an Al-Qaeda attack on the U.S.
Yeah.
Tell us how you went about that.
Well, over the decades I've been working in cybersecurity, I snoop around around the internet. I look for a number of sources and places. I mentioned the open source intelligence technique that I developed. It basically looking at news media and reports all around the world, and then correlating that information, and the stuff that correlates accurately, across all the different sources and all the different viewpoints is probably with a 90% certainty true. But I also, being a cybersecurity professional, one of the things I want to know is what the bad guys are doing. What's the latest technique for hacking something? How do you break into a cell phone? How do I steal a bank account? How do I break into the Social Security system and change somebody's number? How do I break into the National Criminal Information System and put a warrant out on somebody, as has been done in the films? I'm not looking to do these things. I'm looking to understand how they are done for the sole purpose of figuring out a defense and a technical capability to prevent it. So as part of what I do in figuring out how to defend, I also have to learn how to offend. And I go to a lot of places on the internet, a lot of sources that I go to, and I read prolifically. I read a lot of the articles and journals that are out there. A lot of this stuff is published. So I mentioned before, computers and overflowing a string, what's called a buffer overflow. There's an article in a hacker journal called How to Overflow the Buffer for Fun and Profit. And that's a published hacker journal that you can download from the internet even today. It explains in a step-by-step method how to do this. So, I'm looking for hacker tools and that sort of thing. And I was on a website, and somebody had pointed out that there was an interesting article about somebody's vacation. And when I see something that is alluded to perhaps in a nefarious way or with a nefarious implication, I'll go look at it to see what it is. So I went and looked at it, and it was 16 pictures, supposedly, of somebody's vacation. Well, one of the things we're taught in critical infrastructure protection is that a lot of times terrorists and adversaries want to take photographs of places that they want to attack as part of their pre-attack intelligence. So if a piece of critical infrastructure is being photographed by people who shouldn't be there, a power generation facility out in the middle of the wilderness, and somebody standing on a hill taking pictures of the power facility, they better have a darn good reason why they're doing that, because they're probably surveilling it for, the potential of a future attack. And I'm looking at these 16 pictures are supposed to be pictures of somebody's vacation. And I noticed there's a military base. And I noticed some military communications equipment. And then I started analyzing the pictures. And every single photograph had a picture of critical infrastructure. Every single photograph had something that was uniquely geographically identifiable. And I could identify a number of the locations in these photographs. And then there was one photograph that had an image of how do I say this? It had an image of a highly classified secret military installation and was showing some equipment that is very, very highly classified and extremely sensitive. And I knew what it was. And moreover, the government has gone to extraordinary lengths to hide this. There was only one vantage point where it could be seen, and basically a person had to stop a car on a very, very long bridge in a busy highway to take this picture. So somebody went to extraordinary lengths to get this picture. And then I decided, well, this is suspicious. I need to investigate it. So I looked at the source code of the web page, and normally when you post pictures and they're nicely and neatly organized on a page, there's a piece of software that put them in that grid for you. We all do that, let's make it easy. And so that software will typically put a comment in the source code, posted by, this presentation is by, Holiday Pictures Inc. And here's the name of the software. There's a comment that's in the source code. Mm-hmm. It's nothing nefarious. They just put their own credits in there, and you don't see it unless you look at the source code. So I'm figuring I'll look at the source code and get a clue to what's going on. And I look at the source code, and somebody's gone through and cleaned out everything except the specific programming instructions. No comments, no author's name, nothing except the bare raw programming. Somebody had to put a lot of effort in to do that. So then I went to the directory, and the directory wasn't listable, and I went to the directory above that, something called a Beck attack, and I performed a Beck attack on the site, and it got all the way up to the top level directory, and it says, "Thank you for visiting our site." Now the graphics, interesting, it's got these little squiggles all the way around the page. It looks like a fancy, award certificate, right? A graphic design that was copied the whole page around, clearly done by a program, not by a person, on the page that had the 16 pictures of the critical infrastructure, and on the top level page says, "Thank you for visiting our site." So I had some name of some site, right, that I'd gone to, www.something. A lot of people may not appreciate this. The internet doesn't operate on words, it operates on numbers. So you go to google.com, and google.com is not how your computer connects. Your computer basically goes to a phone book. I use the term phone book because we're all familiar with them. It has a name on one side and a number on the other side. So it takes a www.google.com and it translates it to an IP address, 194.217.36.42. And it's that IP address number that we use to access the website. So I went back and I took the name of this place that I was looking at, and I looked up the IP number, and then I went back to my browser and I just put in the IP number without the domain name, just the raw IP number address. That will work in your browser. If you know the address of Google, you just go into Google and type the number in, and it'll bring up the Google webpage. If you don't know that, your HTTP browser is going to go to domain name services, which is the phone book for the internet, and it's going to look up the IP number, and then it's going to go to that IP number. Normally that happens in the background for all of us. So in this case, I looked up the IP number and I went directly to the IP number that was this website. And it turns out that it was a university in a suburb of Hamburg, Germany. And all of a sudden the hair in the back of my neck stood up, and I'm like, wait a minute, I remember something about that. And I went back and looked. It turns out that Mohammed Atta's Al-Qaeda cell was in that same suburb of Hamburg, Germany before they came to the United States. So I got an Al-Qaeda cell that was in the location, a website that's compromising U.S. secure assets and military assets, something that's been manipulated to clean out all the identifying information, and it's happening at the same time that bin Laden was attacking the U.S. and all that sort of stuff. It was too much of a coincidence. At the time, I was the president of Eastern Carolina InfraGard. InfraGard, as you mentioned earlier, it's an organization of all the companies and private operators who run the nation's critical infrastructure. And InfraGard members are trained by the FBI to observe things that may be indicators of a future attack, and to function as an extension of the eyes and ears of the intelligence community. So guys, here's what to watch for. If you see this, please tell us. And the people in the critical infrastructure organizations do. It turns out that more than 90% of our national critical infrastructure is run by individuals in the private sector, not run by the government. So that's why this was created. And I picked up the phone, as the president of the organization. I'd been cleared and background checked by the FBI already. And when I got through to the FBI agent and told him what I found, this is the one time in all the time that I knew him, it's the one time he hung up on me. He's like, gotta go, click. And so the FBI went out and they looked, and I found out years later that they did a search with the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and they got 2 hits on the Joint Terrorism Task Force that correlated to the data that I gave them, and they put a strike team on it. Fortunately, there was an arrest in 48 hours, and so that guy went to court and was convicted. But that's all I'm allowed to say about that. But I was very, very lucky. There is supposed to be $5,000 reward for somebody who does that. And, the agent was saying to me, well, yeah, but it's probably going to be classified, so you have to wait till it's declassified. And I'm like, hell, I don't care. I'm just glad our country didn't get attacked. I don't care about the reward. But
yeah, but you being lucky, what was really lucky was that the country had you looking at it, because without that knowledge and just happened to come across those photographs that tweaked your interest and made you look a little further, God only knows what we would have encountered before long.
We would have had an extensive cyber attack, and I think the damage would have been comparable to the things that happened at 9/11. I mean, a different place, different infrastructure, an attack against our military, but I think our losses would have been about the same magnitude as they were in 9/11. Physically, right? And then economically, a second blow economically after 9/11 would have been extraordinarily destructive to the country. So I'm glad it didn't happen. And, it was one of those things where I was so angered by what happened at 9/11. I have a friend who lived in Building 7 of the World Trade Center, and he told me about watching the planes crash into the World Trade Center on television, and then hearing the debris rain down on the top of his building. He was trapped for several hours and was able to get out of Building 7 with nothing but the clothes on his back. He lost everything. And that was one of the reasons it angered me, and I was out to do what I could to take bin Laden down. And fortunately, we found something that was actionable, and fortunately, I had people who had already had reason to investigate me and trust me. And when I called it in, they listened. If you call the FBI and you're not known, you're going to go to what they call the crazy desk. And they're going to make sure that you're not one of the hundreds of mentally disturbed people who routinely call the FBI every day. That happens. And they're
just like those people down in Florida that were ignored by the FBI before the Parkland shooting.
Yep. So they want some reason to believe that what you're saying is true, and if they can't find that, they're not going to throw a lot of resources behind it. I understand it, The one thing that their process ignores is the consequence of the potential action. So if somebody's going to shoot up a school and kill a kid, the consequence is sufficient to justify the federal government spending the money to make sure that it gets stopped. And that was not part of their decision criteria. And I think that's where a lot of the errors were. They've changed some of that. I hope they've changed a lot of it. I don't know all the details, but I know they changed some after that happened. Still, there are a lot of mentally disturbed people who call government agencies every day. And many of whom have, tinfoil hats. The aliens are coming to get me. They're going to make my ear pregnant or something, stupid things from mentally disturbed people. So there's a lot. I have sympathy for the people who have to answer the phones. They have to wade through a lot of stuff to find the real stuff. Still, we as a country have to do better. Oh,
Doug, this has been a tremendously informative and interesting interview. I'd like for you to take a few moments, sometime after we conclude here today, think about, what, some of the things we've talked about in the event, because, the old saying, the only way to get good answers is to have good questions. And so, I've tried to, take what you had already told me on the telephone and convert that into some dialogue back and forth between us. But it's, you can't do, but, so much. And, and you can't think of everything. But I'd like, if you could think about, what we've talked about and see if there's any additional issues that you can think of that are worth mentioning. We can certainly supplement this podcast with another one. And, and I'll get this over. Ken's got this on his tape right now. He's been recording the entire thing. So, we'll get it edited and get back to you and let you know, what we did, how we did it, and so forth and so on. But this been very, very interesting and informative. I can't thank you enough. I think the people that view this will thank you as well, even if they don't speak to you directly.
Well, thank you very much. And let me apologize in advance to Ken for not pausing enough during this talk and making his editing job a little more difficult. But I guess if there's one thought that I have about all of this, we look at the media today and we hear all these stories. And, I don't think there's one person in the United States who believes that the media is all 100% true. We all know that there are political slants to the media and that there's some false information being put out there. We don't know which is true and which is not. So the question I would pose is, when you're getting information, give some thought to what the basis is for you to trust the person that is reporting it. If I'm watching MSNBC with Don Lemon, why do I trust Don Lemon? Why do I believe what he says? He's a guy who's reporting whatever he's told to report, and I would lay money on the table that if he doesn't read what's on his teleprompter, he's fired. Moreover, MSNBC is owned by Chinese investors, and they're told what to report. So if he doesn't toe the party line, I'm sure he's fired. What's the basis that you place trust in the information you got? I talked a lot about evidence I've seen in this election. The evidence that I've seen are sworn affidavits being submitted to the U.S. Supreme Court. They're sworn under penalty of perjury. They're the same. They meet all the evidentiary standards for submission to the court. Now, there are some statements where somebody speculates about something, and the court is not going to assign evidentiary value to speculation, but that's for the courts to decide. There are so many people on the internet, and it frustrates me daily that people say, oh, there's no evidence of this, there's no evidence of that. Well, there is evidence. There is evidence, and I've seen it.
If anybody thinks that somebody's going to come out and provide all their evidence before they ever get inside a courtroom, I mean, I had a lawyer tell me that the other day. Well, there's no evidence of that. Well, you know, you're a trial attorney. You're a litigator, for God's sake. How you would never go out and publicly disclose what your evidence is before you get inside the courtroom. All you're doing then is handing the opposition the means with which to counter what you give them, what you present. So it's, you know, there's no evidence. It's just such poppycock. But it, you know, when I saw this entire thing, if Sidney Powell is involved, I trust Sidney Powell. I trust her not to do something that is going to be blatantly false. She's not going to lie to the court for anybody. So I think that, you know, her credibility with me was the issue, but I got a lot of people that I know that think that all she was a shill for Donald Trump because the got on that press conference with Rudy Giuliani and spoke about things that then haven't materialized. And you know, these days everybody's in such a hurry to cut to the chase. They're willing to give up a lot of steps along the way. So it's
well, like I said, you know, when somebody reports something as a conspiracy theory on the internet, I look at it and I say, okay, that's an interesting fact. I'd like to know more about that. But I don't instantly believe what they've said. Yes. I go out and correlate it. I want to find it in other places. And the information I got about this election comes from sworn affidavits. So I have a reason to believe them because they're evidentially valid and they've been sworn under penalty of perjury. And if the people are lying, they can go to prison for it. So I've got a good reason to believe, a good reason to trust. I don't have a good reason to trust the news media, even the most trusted outlets. I have found to be incredibly biased and reporting information that is blatantly false and that they should have known better than to report. So, you know, and that goes for all of them, you know, the NBC, CBS, ABC, MSNBC, even Fox. And I've even seen some incorrect information on News Nation, which I had high hopes for initially, but you know, and maybe in their defense, part of this information that in the one report I did see came from the Associated Press. But, you know, I have no confidence in our American media anymore. And I think that's one of the things that we need to do at a grassroots level is organize an alternate media in this country, the podcasts like yours, and ways to put information out. And I think this notion of understanding a basis for why you trust is really important, and teaching people how to identify good reasons to trust, good reasons to distrust would be very, very valuable, knowing that the media is corrupt. And then when people learn how to evaluate that information on their own, and they go looking for themselves, and they realize that somebody has lied to them and they don't deserve their trust, that's 1,000 more times powerful than me telling you that they lied. I want you to find out for yourself. And I want you to understand from a rational process why. And there's a lot of semantic, you know, deception that goes on. So, you know, we watched Hillary Clinton on television say and it's almost a quote, "I've never sent or received anything that was marked classified." Now, Hillary Clinton is a lawyer, and I'm here to tell you that the statement she made is technically correct. She never sent or received anything that was marked classified, because the word classified is not a marking. The security markings are confidential, secret, and top secret. Those are the markings. And Hillary Clinton did send and receive materials that were marked confidential, secret, and top secret. She did not send or receive anything marked classified. So she told the truth, but it was a deceptive truth, and it was deliberately a misimpression that I would classify as a lie. I mean, can I convict her?
Well, if you got to know how to ask, and got to know how to answer.
That's correct. So,
thank you very much. It was wonderful talking to you. Have a great day. And
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.